Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday to you. And hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about space. You didn't know that, did you, Ben? And also, we're going to have Paul Willoughby on later, giving us a bit of a review, a third-party review of TinTech and perhaps what we've learnt. But as always...
Bet you're worried. Bet you're worried.
I'm not worried.
What's he going to say?
What's he going to say? I don't know. Let's ask him. But let's do the news first. So these, your news clips start off with Ben, I think, talking about MS Amlin first up.
Yeah.
Ramping up London underwriting capacity.
That's exactly what's happening. So MS Amlin has been a bit in the shadows for a few years after its after the acquisition by Mitsui Sumitomo. I think if I'm right, the largest or the second largest insurer in the world, and so they are obviously increasing capacity. So the reason for this is, there's two reasons why this is interesting. One is, what are they holding in their hands in that photograph?
Are they all hammering into a massive cheese?
No, like I don't know. Well, that's Phil Hammond, Phil Spreadsheet Hammond, as he was known. So he's an ex-minister, Treasury Minister.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's him. That is Shinichiro Funabiki, my perfect Japanese pronunciation.
Well,
he's the CEO of Mitsui, and he has. But not only is he bringing the cash, well, it's 2 billion to 1 billion, so it's not as. I mean, we throw around billions, don't we, these days? But 2 billion to 3 billion. It's a vote of confidence in the market. He's talking about London still being very investable, and talks about the history, experience, skills, knowledge, and know-how of the market. So I think whatever that ceremony is that they're doing there is obviously meant to, signal visually that this is a good thing for London, and it's obviously a good thing for MS Amlin, and it good to see them back in the game, as it were.
So rather than them all signing the book, they all hammer something into a big cheese.
I don't know what they are really, because I think if we had, what we need is we need Chris Croft from Labour, because he has been, I believe, become an expert in terms of gavels, which are used at some of the Labour or the insurance brokers' meetings to open and close them, and that's maybe what they are. But I only thought you had one, not 5 or 4 they've got there. It's too many.
I saw that LinkedIn post about gavel. I didn't understand it, but anyway.
I mean, Hammond looks like he's going to take the CEO of Mitsui out, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He does not happy.
If you don't sign, this is what you get.
There you go. Interesting stuff. And then that moves us on to kind of Howden rates as well.
So this is David, the always shy and retiring David Howden, as I call him, who is talking about commercial insurance prices leveling off this year, he says. Now, whether he says that rates are coming down. I'm actually hearing in the market as well, through my sources, which I assume are not as good as David's, that rates are coming off a bit now. And I think this is a flag from Howden to the market, to the customers that they have, that actually, that rates are not going to keep on increasing as they have been. I think they've had 25 consecutive quarters, according to Marsh, of increasing rates. So that's the kind of point he's trying to make. But as always, I think Howden then, quite cleverly gets a bit in about Howden and what they're doing. And he talks about choice at the end of this article in the market now, saying that there is now, if you look at reinsurance, there are 4 big brokers who are the key choices for reinsurance. And that's Gallagher's obviously, but and includes Howden. So, but he's kind of upping the ante on the competitive side of broking as well. So while it's ostensibly about rates, I think it's about saying, yeah, we're out there, we're in the game, we're going to be part of this, and we've got a say in it all.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. Howden's always good value for a soundbite or a press release. So good. Talking of choice, let's move into the kind of technology space because we've got a number of people jumping onto the Whitespace platform and making the announcements. You've sort of snipped this one up as well.
Yeah. So obviously, the biggest news was Marsh using this terrible word pivots. You don't pivot anyway to a platform, but there we are. Marsh pivots to Whitespace. They basically say we're going to use Whitespace for everything in London and beyond. And the actual article talks about the new era of innovation and data first approach and stuff like that, which is fine. But you also then had, in the same week, Price Forbes and I believe Ardonna have come on as well. So that is quite, I mean, PPL has the volume in the market at the moment. I think 80% of the volume, or had 80% of the volume. I assume that's changed now. And of what's broadly called, digital trading. But actually, it's fair to say that we, in my view, we're not fully into digital trading yet. We've got systems that are developing, and there are also underneath this all sorts of different aspects of these systems that are being developed. Contract software and so on and so forth, which both Whitespace, Verisk, and PPL are on as well. So, and there's other stuff too to come. So this is the beginning of the journey, I suppose. The thing I think that is, apart from the fact that it's been a kind of seen as a two kind of David and Goliath, I suppose you could call it, battle. What happens to that, I don't know, but it does seem that the original idea that PPL had, that there should be one platform. One was quite confused at the beginning because we talked about it in relation to Blueprint, where they were kind of opening up to competition, but also saying, oh, and ideally though, there'd be one platform, so you wouldn't have to be on all these different systems and things. Now, just obviously we might have Paul on in a minute to comment on this, but I do think this now does look to me like, well, is it really even the notion now that you can have one single platform? Are we just going to really move into a sort of multi-competitor environment of different systems? And if that's the case around the trading system, which is fundamental to the market, what does that say about any other technologies that Lloyd's in particular, or London as an ecosystem wants to do? Because you kind of think, well, actually, as we've discussed before, kind of all means that maybe it all just does go to a sort of normalized competitive market where there are, systems come and go and, succeed or fail by the sword of the market economics.
Yeah.
Competition, basically.
And I also think, and I'm going to be interested to ask Paul this, like, has the technology now moved on, so far with the development of, AI, we're going to talk a little bit about that later, that actually the argument for having one system and one approach and all that, it is kind of redundant now because the technology can kind of take care of those bits. So it'd be interesting. We can chat with Paul about that and how he sees that progressing. But yeah, interesting stuff. As always, we'll keep an eye on that. Let's talk more about that later. I've got a bit of news, Ben. As always, super interested in any kind of space activity. As I can't believe anybody shouldn't be. But anyway, this is great. So this is the US private company, Intuitive Machines, touching down a few hours ago on the surface of the moon. And they put a rover type thing on. I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do, but it sounds like they're going to do a load of experiments and whatnot. What's interesting about it is that, firstly, NASA has kind of bought some space on this mission to put their own instruments onto the moon. So, in the past, you would have NASA, doing everything. They would do they'd build the rocket, they'd make the satellite, blah, 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 up it would go, and they would run it all and all that kind of thing. And now, even in kind of the space industry, all that kind of, one company does everything approach has kind of been disintermediated, I suppose, in a way, which is quite interesting, because you would have thought in such a complex operation of getting something into space that you would need to have control over all those things in order to make it work. And this obviously proves the point it doesn't. I think the other interesting thing from this article is that this thing, so the controllers had to deal with an almost mission-stopping technical problem before the descent began. So the ranging lasers, which kind of gave them the altitude and velocity and all that kind of stuff, weren't working. But fortunately, they had some spare ones on board, and they were managed to engineer these other lasers into place and then land the thing. I was just going, that's just incredible, isn't it? You just... Man, it's just like your brain kind of bursts when you talk about this stuff. And then you kind of bring it into insurance land, and you're going, surely we can get some technology to work and help us somehow.
I've got one overall observation on this, which it says in this headline, historic touchdown. But I think when I was about, I don't know how old I was, about 6 or 4 or something, someone landed on the moon then.
Yes.
But we seem to have forgotten that now. We're going historic landing on moon. I'm only saying, I'm not diminishing this achievement, but it has been done before, I think, hasn't it?
It has. I think what they're saying, the reason it's historic is because it's the first time since 1973 that the US has managed to land something on the moon.
A bit of a small print argument, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go.
Anyway, other than that, yes, it is interesting, and it is definitely, to my point about technology generally, is it does seem to me that technology really does seem to work in all sorts of industries, with lots of people specializing in certain aspects of it. If you think of the car industry, for example, it is a global supply chain of all sorts of different components and things, and that's how it works. But yeah, it does seem that that's what we're quite good at, but there's a notion that we have to have one system to conquer it all, and it's not like that in reality. No. One thing that I would add to this, in terms of your, or anybody actually listening, I don't care about you, but people listening to the show, as interest in space, is this story about the black hole that they discovered, which I won't do now because we've got no clips or anything, except to say that this black hole that they've now seen, it's so far away, but because it's pulling in so much light and creating so much light, they can now see it on the telescopes. But it said that it's the equivalent light of 26, get this, trillion suns.
What?
Every hour. That's how this black hole is operating. Read the story. It is. When you said mind blowing, that is mind blowing, and I just don't. I don't understand. It makes you feel very small.
Doesn't it? Do you know who insured the first landing of Neil Armstrong and
Hiscox?
It was. I'm going to come back to that. Oh, where's my clip gone? Oh, it's there. I got them in the wrong order.
Oh, Travellers.
Good
old Travellers. Good friends of Travellers.
So maybe that's why Christian Kitchen's so into his moon thing. And let me just bring it back. So Christian at Tintech was talking about the book, which is all around the first lunar landing. And it is an incredible story. But there is also, let me just come back to this 13 minutes to the moon, the story of the Apollo landing, which is just amazing. The whole thing is just incredible. You know, if you're into leadership, organizational ability, you know, just technology, it is just mind blowing. It's brilliant. And then I found a publication called Space News, which I immediately signed up to. So there are a couple of plugs there. And then I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to No Rodea and an event that we went to. Well, not you didn't get invited, but myself and Paul Willoughby, who we will be speaking to shortly. Yeah, we had a great time. It was brilliant. Probably the best event I've ever been to. Yeah. Apart from my bald head there, which is annoying. But yeah, we had a talk by Sir Clive Woodward, the rugby coach in 2003. I'm not a massive rugby fan, but he also did a stint with football, so that pleased me. But one of the things that he talked about was this idea of teacup, which is thinking correctly under pressure. So that little bit of a story that I talked about, where they went, oh my God, the lasers aren't working for the moon landing. I mean, they would have, I'm sure, scenarioed that very situation and thought, what are going to be our plan A, plan B, plan C if that doesn't happen? And and he was talking a lot about this in terms of sport, and it was really fascinating. And in claims as well, at London Market Claims, we talk a lot about scenario planning, but actually it's still not done to the degree and depth that Clive was talking about last night. And I think we've got a long way to go to get to that kind of excellence in planning and scenario testing, which will really help, I think, the industry and clients particularly. Anywho, are we going to do Right Said Fred now?
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, who's not going to be shocked by that image? Wow.
Have you got the other one, the LinkedIn one?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to bring this to the attention of our viewers. So this is actually posted by Cara McFadden, who's head of marketing at Gallagher Specialty, and she's saying it's well. So and this is by this person at the bottom who did an article, Kelly Ogley in the Insurance Times, about making insurance sexy. Now, so if we don't resolve our industry branding, we won't attract talent. We need to shout about how sexy our industry is. Now, I don't know where I go with this from here, except that I can see Cara's point, which is that, and would agree with it, that we need to make it more interesting and engaging and things. But I don't know whether, I'm not sure what we mean by sexy, other than in the broadest terms of it being kind of, kind of engaging, I guess. And the other thing is, and we'll talk a bit more about Nigel Walsh at Google. He talks about making insurance lovable. So I think there's a theme starting. Love. Years ago, Nick Sinfield, who was head of claims at Catlin, kicked off his campaign to promote their claims with a Love the Broker week. And I thought that was good, but it was a one-off. But it seems like it's coming back. So,
right.
do you think we can make it sexy? I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's I think we've talked about this before.
Is any industry sexy?
Yeah, exactly. No. I mean, space. We've just been talking about is exciting, and
Maybe sexy is the right word. I just, we did those events, didn't we, about awards events and things, and they kind of tried to make them a bit like that. The Butcher's Award of the Year, Butcher of the Year, but that wasn't sexy unless you're into that sort of butchery thing.
Yeah, I nearly said something then, but I didn't. Good.
Quick,
Well,
get Paul on.
let's get Paul on. I got the guest of the week jingle, but I've lost it. Okay, so let's just say hello to Paul. Hello, Paul.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, Paul. Good.
Yeah, all good, thanks. All good. It's good to see you. It was good to see you last night.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it was really good. I think it was quite interesting. You just picked up on the teacup piece. And, I always stand up on stage and talk about how insurers need to differentiate and, get behind one thing. Do you want to be the smartest? Do you want to be the fastest? Do you want to be the most client-centric? Like, what do you want to be? Because I think there's a real lack of differentiation at the moment. And what Sir Clive Woodward was talking about was what we're going to talk about, like the North Star, which I don't really like saying, was we've just got to win the World Cup. That's just our sole point of focus. And we just spend our lives just looking at 25 different things, and that's where we lose our focus. So I thought it was really interesting. Awful lot you could add to insurance.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good talk. So I should go on because a couple of weeks ago we had Tintech London Market, and you were there. Well, we were all there, weren't we? I didn't get to see all of it because I was kind of running it. So it's nice to get a third person to tell us what it was like. But I think, from my point of view, it was really busy, which was great because I think it showed a level of engagement that we haven't seen before with tech and operations and change and culture and all the stuff that we talk about on here. But yeah, I just wondered what your kind of thoughts were and takeaways. I know that talked about that North Star and people being a bit open.
Yeah, I was going to say it was an awful experience, but the reason being is because it's the first time we had a stand there. So we're 2 years old now as a business. It's the first time I've ever stood up at a stand all day. And I couldn't walk by the end of the day. My back had gone, my knees had gone. So that experience, not so good. But actually, I thought it was a really, really good event. And I think that what I said afterwards, there was so much more honesty and openness this time around. I wrote an article for Tintech around it, but the keynotes were just very honest and transparent about the challenges of transformation, right? It's really hard. I had a full head of hair many years ago before we started on all these projects. It's Ian Fantozzi stood up and talked about how they hadn't set themselves up for success many years ago. And it was around getting around this one North Star moment. And it was really heartwarming to hear people just being honest, really. And that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear hypothetical, these are the 5 stages of a project. This is how you set yourselves up for success. I want to know your scars. I want to know where they were inflicted, who inflicted them, and what you've learned from it. That's kind of what the audience was after.
Yeah, you certainly got that from Pamela Thompson Hall.
Yeah,
I mean,
amazing.
to talk about that, that merger that didn't happen and the implications for the business, and then how they reset. I mean, it really was kind of almost inspiring, really, in many ways.
It was, and there's so much disruption going on. How do you keep your business going with that amount of disruption? How do you keep to your strategy? And actually, it's kind of redefined both businesses, which I like. There's a positive to take from it. And Pamela was very clear, about how it kind of got her team back and focused. And they realised that they were open. They were open to that merger. They'd allowed themselves to be open. So how do we stop that happening in the future? I thought she was fantastic. It's the first time I've seen her speak, but I would definitely listen to her again.
Great. Yeah, it was. I mean, I think just to your point, Paul, there's a whole load of stuff I've been reading about advertising, branding, and things. I know you talk about that as I do, but that feel that there's a lot of evidence that said it's completely the emotional that sells when you advertise, not the rational. The rational things don't matter, and I think it's just good to see events and things with that sort of energy and feel where you say, you feel it, don't you? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent 25 years going to events like this on the other side of the fence, as a head of strategy or a head of innovation. I'm looking for what's next. What should I be worrying about? It was really nice to sort of be on the vendor side, as a consultant, because people were very open about, their challenges with data. Everybody's grappling with AI and everybody's struggling to figure out what that means for their business, what that means for the operations teams. How do you even get started? And so it was just interesting for me that there was so much openness about the challenges. As I said, there wasn't as much people standing on stage saying, we're brilliant, look what we've done. There wasn't that marketing angle. It was much more around, we're all in this together. We're all trying to create distribution channels. We all need digital. So, yeah, I like that. I just like open honesty and transparency.
Yeah. So just coming back to our early conversation when we were talking about technology, and I kind of fumbled around just talking about has technology kind of moved on, in the last, let's just say 3 years, to a point where, the landscape is so different. You just talked then about people, experimenting with this and trying to understand how it's going to impact their lines of business, how it's going to impact their operating model. Are those the types of conversations that you're having, and what direction do you think it's going to go? Do you have an opinion yet?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot more curiosity out there, which is great, because years ago, and I mean, you were talking earlier about platform choice. There was kind of one choice for policy admin system. There's one choice for electronic trading. There was one choice for MGA system. And there's just this vast, I mean, we do a lot of RFPs for people. We do a lot of market research, landscape analysis on technology. And there's just swarms and swarms of new providers coming into the market, which is fantastic, because as I said, as someone in strategy and operations, I wanted to pick best in class. I wanted to always get the best back office, the best front office, the best customer experience layer, and I wanted to plug it all together. And historically, you just couldn't do that. Now you can go with that kind of componentized piece. What I find really interesting at the moment, Jamie, we were doing an RFP last year for a vendor, and by the time we'd kind of written the RFP, written the requirements, gone to market, the technology had moved on so much that actually it was redundant. The answer was already in front of us. It was an AI-based solution, and someone popped up and went, "What about one of these?" And it was like, "Oh God, we feel like we've wasted 6 months." But that's going to happen more and more. I think people are. That's why you kind of got to use this experimental nature of testing smaller components, because it is moving very quickly.
Yeah. So do you think that, Paul, is a kind of we've talked about this before, a kind of democratization of technology? Because the thing I think about generative AI that's different from other things is it's not just a theoretical bunch of charts or articles. It's actually there on your computer that you can use and play around with it. So it creates this, my kind of analogy is, if I do photography, I go to Photoshop, but then beyond Photoshop is this whole community of people who play around and mess around with it. So it's, you can always find an answer to your question. And sometimes when you've got a bit of time, you might say, well, there's something inspiring or different that I can do, that I can learn. I wonder, is that what you're kind of saying around it now,
yeah. I am. I think, Ben, years ago, people would say to me, Paul, we need to bring in this data set. It might be credit data, it might be fraud data, it could be anything, sanctions. And we'd be like, okay, we'll start a project. And 9 months later, we would have found the data, we would have signed it off, and then we'd think, oh God, where are we going to host it? We can't put it in the policy admin system. So invariably, we'd chuck it into Excel, and it would be on the side of their desk, and they would go and use it and go, yeah, it's great, it does what it needs, but it's not part of my workflow, it's not part of my process. And in the end, it just, these things never got taken up, because people didn't want to go over here, then over there, then over there. Yeah. And, we always use the word workbench, but a workbench for me, I always say this, is more of an experimentation tool. It's a place to host these experiments. It's a place where you can bring in the new and the latest modern slavery data or ESG data, make it part of the workflow in that single pane of glass, another terrible term, but actually embed it in much more easily than we used to. It used to take us years to do it. And now you can actually, I call it widgets, widgetization. That's a word I should create, right? But it's multiple widgets embedded in. And if you don't like it, you kind of delete the widget, same as you do with an app on your phone. You get to test it. Don't like it, delete it. And I think that's what people are building. They're building these operating systems, these iOS, iTunes or whatever it is. That's kind of what they're building for
So the history, I mean, counter to how the market has tended to operate in London and Lloyd's, where it's a sort of monolithic approach.
Yeah.
It seems we're moving towards a phase now where it's only going to succeed if people use it.
Yeah.
That's kind of the measure, isn't it? You can. So does that take you much more into, if you're a designer or a developer now, you've got to really, really understand that customer and what their needs are? Or is it more about the design, the UX or something like that?
I do, yes, but I see it so much where I'm guilty of doing it in the past. We see this technology and we go, oh, that's going to solve that problem, right? That little boutique thing that I've got.
Yeah.
What I think if we go back to who do you want to be, it makes it so much easier to design a system or an architecture if you know what the company wants to be. If you want to be the smartest, then it's about bringing in data for thought leadership, and managed to make my thumb go. That's quite impressive. It's about bringing in that data. It's about
you're so good at technology. You can even do that. We've been doing this on this platform for about a year, and we haven't even done that.
Coded that this morning. But it's if you want to be the smartest, you've got to use data, right, to make decisions. But it's not going to make you the fastest because that takes time. If you want to be the fastest, that's where AI and machine learning comes in. Bonding quicker. Until you do that, you end up just building a plethora of widgets that don't really get you any further. You've got to nail that strategy piece, and this was what was coming out of the conference.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying it goes back to strategy and your absolute fundamental commercial aim to be successful, and then you work everything else around that. Yeah. Well,
makes sense, right? And I spent my years spinning my wheels doing the opposite, and now I kind of preach to say you've got to be clear on where you want to go.
And I can comment on this. Do you see much more proper strategic planning going on in businesses nowadays?
Kind of, and it's the point. I'm doing another article at the moment. I think I've had a bit of a wake-up call. So I'm from a large risk reinsurance background, spent my life in the open market space, and been doing some research into delegated lately. And open market, I always see very clear strategies about how we're going to ingest and use data and all of these kind of performance metrics. Perfect. And I look at the delegated space and I think this is 40% of 60% of someone's business, 40% of what we do. And I can see a lack of strategy there. And I think, are we sleepwalking into sort of, a problem here where we're not treating this huge part of our world as strategically as we would if it was open market? And I think that's...
And that's interesting because I think, my understanding of what strategy is it's really, really, the thing you've got to really work out is what is your fundamental challenge to be successful. That could be it could be a competition, it could be a technological obstacle or whatever. But you're right. I think in areas, a lot of the time, the businesses think administratively and process-wise instead of, does this process even matter if it's nothing to do with our key challenge?
Yeah.
So I wonder if you get the same feeling as I do, which is that because there is a lack of that intellectual input to what the strategic challenge actually is, because usually it's something you didn't think about. I mean, that's what I've experienced when I've done the strategy. It's going, oh my God, it's that. Yeah. We were thinking it was something else. Because I think the tendency for humans in organizations is to kind of get a set of 5 or 6 things that they've read or heard or talked to people about and go, well, it's probably one of these. So it's like technology, or it's our service, or it's this or that or the other. And you go, well, actually, it's none of those.
No.
It's something else,
Yeah. Ben, we talk about it a lot in claims, right? We assume it's speed of payment. That's all it's about. It's about getting to the decision. Actually, when you talk to people when they've had a claim, it's about transparency. I just want to know if it's a big, nasty one, or if you're going to pay it in the next couple of weeks, right? I kind of just want to be communicated. I want my expectations managed, but everyone's focusing on the kind of the operational tasks and trying to fix those. It's basic communication. And I think that goes for the same as submissions with brokers, right? You don't have to be the fastest. You just got to kind of tell them where it is in the pipe. It's,
Yeah, you're right. But then you absolutely must, therefore, I think you're absolutely right. I agree with you. Come back to that commercial possibility of being successful, isn't it, really? To say, look, forget, just this is what we're here to do, to make a profit in a capitalist society from a business that we've invented, which in large part is an abstraction. It's a made up thing. Even if you're an insurer, you're like this. And you said there's no differentiation, they're all the same. I agree. But you kind of have to conjure up both the real stuff and the abstract and say, look, this is how we do it. This is how we make it. And I don't know that I think the industry has enough people in it who think that way, at the moment.
No. And I think it's interesting that we always, when we do these board executive strategy days, myself, Caroline Bedford of Eddie, we ask the question, like, who do you want to be? What is your business? And, the answer is always, well, we're the most specialist. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does specialist actually mean? Is it you're the most specialist service to your clients? Is it the products? Is it the way you develop products? Is it you're special because you're agile? Or what does that actually mean? And I think it's a bit of a cop-out. Yes, we're a specialist market, but it's about, how do you identify your business? And once you do that, it's kind of liberating. I've seen it happen a few times with executive teams where they all sit back and go, oh, that's what we've got to do. And it changes everything. It kind of changes the way you train your staff. It changes the way that you design your technology and services, changes the way you're communicating, your branding. And I've seen it a couple of times lately where businesses are thriving because they've just answered that one critical question.
And sometimes when you get technology, often when you get technology, not sometimes, what the software designer thought it was going to do, actually, it's the byproduct of something else that links, isn't it, to that thing. They go, oh, actually, that thing over there is supposed to do that. It does this really, really well. It's like the blue tack thing, isn't it? That they were all failed product. It was a failed product, but it had just enough stickiness to not leave residue on the wall when you put
I remember years ago we put a new claim system in, and the idea was it's just going to make claims more efficient, and that was it, right? It's just a better way of doing what we do today. But the byproduct was we had all of the data on actually the cost of the claim, what the third party expenses were, how long we were sat on it, and that was the valuable part. If you could have put the ROI on that, it would have justified itself.
Well, and that we monitored that and we measured all that, and we spent nearly 2 years with brokers saying, "Oh, this is terrible. We hate this system and don't want to use it." Yeah. And then there was an absolute. I must show the data at some point in the show. There was a tipping point at which brokers started to say, "Oh, actually, this is really good because we've had a few difficult ones and we've got an audit trail of everything on this system." But prior to that, nobody had said one of the main benefits of ECF is going to be the fact it's all just on your computer, because that seemed too bleeding obvious, I suppose, to people who designed it. What you mean you're going to have the data in one place on a computer? That's incredible.
You're talking to someone who started his career carrying claims files around in a suitcase. So trying to get them up the tube at Bank and over to Holborn, that was my job.
Did you not have a suitcase like some of them?
I did. No, got very long arms though. Carrying 25 claims files. It was an art form.
It just reminds me of the talk from Clive last night, Paul, when he was talking about kind of to understand your business, you need to kind of write that book, and it's a book that will never get finished because you can't do it once and done. We've just talked about the rate of technology change and the way that it's kind of penetrating and shifting the landscape. You need to kind of do it, have those strategic discussions, have that data so you can refine, optimize, and maybe, to use that terrible word we used before, pivot in another direction. So I think it's really interesting. Do you think that the organizations are starting to get that now at a more strategic level when they're making investment decisions, whether it's in technology or resourcing or whatever, that they have that clarity of strategic thinking, or is it still lacking?
Obviously I don't speak to every syndicate, every broker, but I certainly think
One day,
this
Paul.
is
One day,
be nice,
mate.
wouldn't it? As long as they're all in the same building, I don't want to walk
Yeah.
about too much.
I think you'd be on the beach at that point. Anyway.
Yeah, I think this is why external perspectives are so valuable, and it's why the big consultancies have been around for years. But actually, somebody like me rocking up, who's been there and done it and got the scars to say, actually, you're going to waste your money because you haven't decided who you want to be. And I don't necessarily care if they go, get out, we know who we are, because great, I've helped them. They know that, right? And they don't need our help. You're not going to take money off someone to sort of help them define their strategy if it's a very clear strategy. The answer is then, great, what next? Let's get going. Let's accelerate. But very rarely do they ever go, this is my mission statement. This is what we're going to achieve. This is the bottom line, the end result we're looking for.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it, I've done it to myself. We started our business 2 years ago, and this year, as usual, I'm like tension span of 10 seconds. I'm like, we're going to go and do this in ESG, and we're going to do that. And a good friend of mine said, look, write a statement of work to yourself, write a strategy document for yourself. And I literally wrote a email, dear Paul Willoughby, we are going to help you define your strategy. And I wrote it like that. And it all just became very clear that it was just about focus. Just focus on what you're going to, focus on what you're good at, and focus on some key initiatives and just get going. It was a real game changer for us. And that's kind of what we do.
And so I don't want to mention other consultancies other than the Folio Group, obviously, but I will. And obviously, when we talk strategy, we're talking about organisations like Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, and so on. And those are kind of the real strategy houses that I would have seen in most other sectors that I'd worked in the past, particularly in banking and so on. Now, they all have their pros and cons, I guess. But I'm struck by, I always was struck by the sort of clarity, if you like, of those organisations when it comes to strategy, and it's kind of the conversation we've just had. But my question is, I don't see many of these operating at the moment in the market. I see a lot of kind of operational type consulting.
Yeah.
I see a lot of the stuff that sort of the Aon Endpoints and others do, which is kind of business sales activation, moving volume premium through more efficiently and all those sorts of things. I don't much see that kind of, look, we've really nailed our strategy, because what you seem to be saying, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing at all, is that if you do get that absolute challenge and strategy nailed, it makes it very much easier for everybody then to implement and execute the thing, doesn't it? But the problem is that often you don't execute, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're executing against.
Yeah, I wrote it in the article last week. You wouldn't go on holiday without some sort of rough idea whether you want to go to the beach or the city or hot or cold. You've kind of got an idea where you want to go, and then you narrow it down and you filter it down into, actually, I want to go to that place. That makes it much easier to book your holiday and your trips and everything else you're going to do, because you've got that clarity of thought. And I think it's fundamental, right? I think what the big strategy guys are good at is the framework stuff. They can get you to that quite quickly. I think a lot of it is about incremental change as well. It's like 5% here, 10% here. It's less actually transformational. And I think that's what the Google guys have been doing very well. We talked about Nigel earlier. He fundamentally wants to change the market for the good, right? He absolutely loves insurance, as I do. We talk a lot. They're the ones that are really going to do the transformation of stuff, because actually they don't have that legacy thinking. They don't have that legacy perspective. I sat in workshops with them, and then somebody said, well, it's the way we've always done it. And they've gone, but why? We can ask those sort of intricate questions. So I think there's lots of help out there. And actually, there's lots of very, very good heads of transformation that can do this stuff. They just probably don't have the time to sit back and go, are we taking on the right thing here?
Yeah.
So the thing we talked about as well, I wouldn't mind asking you about quickly, is obviously Amazon pulled out of the Amazon shop and things, and there was quite a few good articles afterwards, which we talked about on the show. And the basic premise of those was that actually Amazon didn't do its usual thing, which is to just go in and own the ecosystem. and then sell to various third parties the data for that ecosystem to allow them to trade. Mentioning kind of companies like Google and Amazon and things, when you talk about their strategy, that is their strategy, isn't it? Their strategy is there's no point in doing this unless you own the ecosystem and have the data, and then you parcel it out to all these parties for whatever you're selling, whether it be apps or, shops on their platform or whatever. Do you think that's, and I realize this is a big kind of guess in a sense, but do you think that's possible still? Because either we go forward with a world of multivariate things dealing with all the silos and the pockets of the industry, or someone sweeps some or all of it up.
Years ago, when I worked at Lloyd's, we were really worried about someone coming in, Qatar government, and saying we're going to create a hub and it's going to take over, right? And when we ran around, what's the term? We ran around with our pants on our head, worried about that, and actually wasn't really of an issue. What we should have sat there and said is, we got 50,000 people working in insurance in the London market alone, and they all have a job to do. And there's, 500 different technology vendors. There's 750 brokers. They're all there because it's quite complex what we do. I look a lot in personal lines now, and I look at what they're doing, and I go, well, they've got home, motor, pet, travel. It's 4 products, right?
Yeah.
My busy days, we had 85 products, and then 75 variations of the 85, all with a different data model, all with different regulatory complexities, all needing different sanctions controls. So I think for the likes of Amazon to come in and say, actually, we're going to do that, they can massively underestimate the fact that we've got teams of lawyers sitting out in the US just trying to get admitted and surplus licenses, done. What we do is really, so I can't see it. I can see them coming in and helping out with pockets of it. So the captives of this world, absolutely, that's probably ripe for the picking. But I can't see it. I hope not, because both my children are, one's in insurance, another one looks like
and therefore you're saying that it's not as, what you're saying is it's not as commoditized as we kind of make it. Therefore, you really get back into pricing and say, we don't charge enough for this product, which is a kind of difficult thing to deal with in the market where everybody sells on price. So it might be that is part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we will have hubs and marketplaces which are akin to a price comparison website, but that for us is probably a race to the bottom, and that will be certain commoditized products. But I think CFC have just launched an IVF product, which is fantastic. That's you're not going to sell that on a marketplace, are you? That's a boutique product set for a specialist market, and that's what we do. That's what we're good at. We just don't do that quick enough. We don't get out of our own way enough.
I think a lot of this probably therefore does lie in the selling. And funnily enough, it's reminding me, I saw a presentation from CFC selling a, what's that product called? Is it Crisis? It's the one where you get, when you get food, if your restaurant has, gets food poisoning or whatever, I can't remember the product. But anyway. Forgotten the name of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, insurance for
reputational damage, is it that one?
No, it's the anyway. It's when you get you buy it to cover yourself in case you have contamination or things like that. So I think it's contamination anyway. But they had a very, very good sort of sales proposition explaining all the different aspects of what can happen, and reputation damage was in it, but what their product covered and what it didn't. And the thing I'd say about it was interesting. Because what they'd done was they talked about the problem and how it could manifest itself for a business. So although it was an insurance audience when I saw it, I think it would have been very interesting to a business audience. They developed that sales material for that. And it was delivered by 2 young lads, basically, I'd call them, who looked like they were straight out of Peaky Blinders. So you weren't putting this, they weren't C-suite types, typical insurance types talking about this. It was just like, this is basically how it works, right? And this is what happens when you do it. So it was relatable, I suppose, is what I'd say. And I don't think I've seen much of that. So, more of that would be great, I think, because
we've all got very lazy, Ben. And I think, we used to develop products and we'd throw it to a broker and go, off you go. And then when we didn't,
Yeah.
when we built services propositions, we then, services first, crisis management, those sorts of things. You then got to train your brokers because they've got to be able to sell that. They've got to believe in it, and they've got to talk, authoritatively about that product. And that's the new world. It's the insurer that's doing that wins. It's why Beazley's so good at what they do. They spend an awful lot of time.
That kind of, it's really the need for this better B2B marketing, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a way, which is we don't do it very well because Jeremy and I have talked. I mean, if someone came along to Jeremy and said, "I've got this product for conference organisers," and did a CFC on it, you'd be pretty engaged, wouldn't you, Jess?
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. But they never did, and so we never took out insurance for the first 15 years until a train strike hit Tintec, which was quite painful.
Somebody's missed a trick there, haven't they, Jeremy? You weren't buying insurance for 15 years. That's 15 years of premium income that hasn't been generated by somebody. Yeah,
and now we do buy it, and and we can see the value of it, because it's going to protect us from the nightmare that we had when it hit. Now, if someone had come along and said, "You haven't done a proper risk assessment," because we don't, we're a very small business, so we're continually plowing the furrow, and don't really have time to analyze the whole business in the ways that we talking about. If someone can come in and sell you something and understand your business and just go, "Look, do you know that?" And then you can make an informed decision. You can actually go, well, the risk of that happening is, it's not worth the premium. However, if there is a train strike on that day,
yep,
how is this policy going to react, and how is it going to help me and my clients and everything else? So yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, I spent many years building PI policies and packages and business owner packages. So you think I'm a sophisticated buyer, and then I have to buy it for my own business, and I was like, what do I do? Like, what do I need? I don't know what I need. And I had to ring a broker up, and the broker talked me through it. And I was like, oh, I can sleep well tonight because I know that I'm not going to get sued for doing something that I didn't know that I shouldn't have done. So it's just, I think that's why we exist, right? It's the allowing people to sleep well at night. And I think the more that we spend time with clients, asking them what it is they actually need, the better. But again, we don't do enough of that because of the disintermediation of it all.
Yeah, good. Right, always good to talk to you, Paul. Thanks ever so much for coming on. And no doubt we shall speak again very soon.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Good to see you, Paul.
See you later. See you soon.
Yeah,
bye.
Bye. Always good to talk to Paul. It's great, isn't it? Just give that other perspective. And we'll get him back on and get him to talk a little bit more about the DA stuff. We talked about this, didn't we? We need to look more at delegated authority, because I think Paul's onto something.
I mean, I think there's not just Paul, but quite a few people we're talking with at the moment saying the same thing. It is really kind of, seems to be going up the priority list quite a bit at the moment. And I think it is bringing that debate of, how do you manage things at a distance, and are you, be careful what you wish for, because this may be efficient, but it may not be what you want. And I think the same argument, I mean, broadly across any kind of outsourcing, but NGAs and what their role is a very significant, I think, growing debate around that.
Yeah.
Which goes to the heart of what does the capital provider, if you like, what's its role potentially in the future? Is it it's certainly there to provide capacity and capital, that, but is it there to invest in technology and data storage and stuff like that to help the chain sell the product? And I think that is, as they say, an ongoing debate.
Definitely. Good. Right, we're out of time, but you've got an event, Ben, on Tuesday.
Yeah. So we will talk about this next week again, but we've got the 2024 InsurIndex launch of the London market brands. So we've got an event. We've got 50 odd people coming from all sorts of marketing brands and other relevant parts of the businesses to come and see that. And we've got some good speakers. I think we've got Tim Rayner's going to say a few words from Verisk, and Rosemary Jones, who we both know from Mosaic, is going to talk about being a challenger brand. And Cara, who we saw earlier from Gallagher's, is also going to, from Gallagher Specialty, is going to talk a bit about her experiences of building a brand within a brand, in the sense the specialty business of Gallagher, you know, within a now very large business. So yeah, it should be really good. And you're doing a bit of emceeing for me.
I am, yeah. Although being a Tuesday, it was funny that Paul said that he couldn't walk after coming to the conference, because I immediately left the conference and went and played 2 hours of football.
Oh God.
Yeah. But you know, it's Tuesday, so yeah, I'll do a bit of that. So good fun all round.
Yeah, it should be good. So we'll let everybody know about let it on here afterwards, and we'll get and do a bit of coverage of that. Yeah,
good stuff. Right, what are you doing this weekend, Ben? Rock climbing?
Yes, I'm doing a bit of rock climbing, and then not much else actually. I think maybe a long walk out in the countryside, blow the cobwebs away.
Yeah, good. We're moving office, so I'll be in a new location.
Ooh, yes, and you've got all sorts of fancy stuff, haven't you?
I to be honest with you, I can't remember what it looks like. It was so long ago. So anyway, look forward to moving in next week. So we'll show you around.
We'll have fun.
Good. Right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next week, and have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Bye.